Good evening all. Tonight we are going to be trimming up USDA choice bone-in beef short ribs. Now there are several types of ribs you can get with beef. Back ribs, short ribs, and a couple others. I'll link an article down below that will show the difference between them. You want to make sure you get beef short ribs. They're hard to find and they can be quite expensive. In this case, I found some at our local Fairway that were on sale. Now, the initial immediate thing you'll notice about short ribs over that of their pork counterparts is they're a much thicker piece of meat than your pork rib would be. What this means is it can be a lot more forgiving when you're doing a long cook, and you have less likely that it's going to dry out. Now, another thing to note between the beef short rib and a pork rib is that you typically do not remove the back skin as you would on a pork rib, because this skin will hold the rib together once you have it cooked. So I won't even season it. But you do want to remove some of the skins up here that you see under the silver skin, because otherwise the rub and whatnot will not get to the meat. So there is several different ways to do it. I've been watching several videos, and you kind of just work your way along as you're cutting. Now, there are going to be people watching. They're going to say, what is this guy doing? Well, I'm a newbie at this. This is my first time doing beef short ribs. You want to try to avoid taking any more meat off than you have to. But on the same token, you can see the silver skin there. I am prepping these tonight so that they will be ready to go tomorrow when I fire up the smoke early in the morning and cook throughout the day. I had not initially planned on doing beef short ribs till I happened to be over at Fairway and found them on sale. Now, don't need to go too deep. I may have gone a little deep here, but with practice comes perfection, and I'm a long way from that. So what we're going to do here is keep going, trying to stay up towards the surface. Because what you're doing is you're exposing the meat at the top to where you plan to have your rub. Now, with a brisket with a fat cap, you might score it or do whatever. Well, this has that silver skin underneath, which makes for an interesting challenge. You can see how the fat cap here runs fairly deep. So you have to take it off layer to layer so you don't end up cutting or over cutting the meat. Unfortunately, the silver skin is beneath the fat, which you can get through slowly but surely. Don't necessarily have the best knife etiquette, but be careful with it. And get away with that. Now there's a lot of videos that will show you how to do this much better than I am. So I'm doing this just to give you an idea what it's like first time I did it, so that when you don't go to do it the first time you do it, you can say, hey, look, I did a better job than that guy. So anyway, come along very carefully so you don't come loose and cut yourself. You try to get as best you can under this fat cap without going too deep. It's like shaving away dirt out in the yard. Has a sense of looking at it that way. You can see how I'm getting a good chunk of the silver skin off. You want to try to expose as much of the meat as you can without cutting yourself. I'll save that for a different video. As you see, you just slowly work your way down. You don't need a lot of pressure on the knife. See a sharp knife. They do make gloves that you can wear under or over your gloves, so in case you do slip, you don't cut yourself. I've not yet invested in those, but I foresee myself doing that, because it is relatively easy to slip with the knife. Just take, as long as you're aware of it when you're using it, you can avoid cutting yourself. Now, when I'm getting down into the valleys here, I'm getting down just at the base of the fat. Now at this point, you could really try to score it if you wanted to. I have not seen a video yet where somebody's done that, so I'm not sure how successful that would be. And this is not necessarily a piece or cut of meat that you want to screw up. So I'm going to try to follow the suggestions that I've read about and watched on several videos, and trying to get as much of this fat off as possible. And therefore the silver skin, as you can see there, that's underneath it. I'm not the best meat trimmer, but I think I'm probably not the only one with lack of skills that does this. So far, I managed to get a large chunk of the silver skin off, which should give me a good measure of success of getting the rub into the meat. When I started this was about a 4.5 pound piece of meat. I'm sure it's going to be about 4 pounds. The idea when I get it onto the smoker will be to do it at 225 to 250, depending upon what I get my particular level I'm going to cook it on to, and go for about 4 hours before I start doing any ideas of spritzing on the meat. Now the idea here is I've gotten down so you can see the silver skin that is under the fat. So by not taking the fat off, you're leaving a layer that is going to block rather significantly any chance of your rub getting to the meat properly. So what you can do at this point, if you don't want to butcher anymore, is to score it and run a knife across. That's what I do on the pork ribs. On the bottom, I'll go take this off. But you can see the majority of the silver skin is gone. And you can see it by the sheen when you get it in the proper light. So lighting is good. And you can go nuts and spend hours, or you can declare it done, score it, mark it so that your rub gets underneath properly. And I'm sure there's going to be people that say, oh, you can get a lot more of that off. And I'm sure I could, but I'm going to call it quits, I think, with everything I've done here. Now that being said, what I'm going to do, just to give myself a fighting chance with the rub, is I'm going to score what little fat there is left on top. Now with this, I'm going to do a simple rub. I do multi-layers when I do my rubs, and that's going to be a simple case of salt to start out with. Now again, what I'm doing here is I'm keeping one hand dirty and one hand clean, so that I go along and I'll start out before I put any binding on is doing some salt. Now some people say you can go heavy on it. There's all kinds of schools of thought on that. I tend to agree with that. I put it on before I put any mustard or oil on. And what this will do is settle in and get the meat to sweat a little bit overnight. Now you don't want to forget the edges of the meat, which I'll try to show here. one thing you can see for certain is the bones of a beef rib are much bigger. I've heard people call them dino bones. There are different cuts that you can get. There, that's about enough. So next, I am going to put on some mustard. As a bind. Don't have to put a lot on. Just enough to get your rub to stick to it. Now again, some people might do it differently with the what order they put things on, but that's the order I follow. Since I got my dirty glove even far dirtier with mustard, I'm going to get a clean dirty glove on. Next little trick I do is I use the au jus from Fanny Cooks that we find in our local store, and that just is a light dusting that I put on. I'll do that with pork butts, as well as brisket. As a beginning layer. Next, I might add a little bit of pepper, not necessarily as much as the salt, but just to get that underlying bit of last but not least, I'm going to take Fanny Cooks Kentucky Bourbon barbecue rub as a layer underneath. Once I take off and open it, this is what happens when you're shooting a video and you think you have everything set, and you get little things that you can think about editing out later. Now that I use both hands, I'm going to glove up with one. The idea here being that I have a dirty hand and a clean hand. So I was going to say, I'm probably just going to do this on the top. More so the sides, because it'll just come off the sides. Because you can see it's kind of a, I don't want to say a thick rub, but it's got a lot of heavy particles to it. So next, I'm going to take the same low and slow barbecue rub from the same person, and this I'm going to do rather liberally on top of everything else. This is what's going to serve as your first layer of protection for, as you can see when I turn it on its side, the rub is, you don't want to rub it in. You just want to kind of get it in and pat it. If you spill some, you can always come back and pat it on. Putting it on your hand. And there you have it. So what I'm going to do with this is put it into a piece of tin foil pan, cover it with tin foil, and it's going to sit like this until tomorrow morning, and it'll go onto the smoker. And that is my first food preparation video. So if you're still laughing and still with it, I will see you in the next part when we go onto the smoker in the morning. Good morning. The starter chimney is going with some B&B charcoal, and I'm going to be smoking with a bit of apple today. And I have my first load of B&B, which should give me about anywhere from 10 to 12 hours of smoking in the chimney. It is currently about 36 degrees outside, and so once this gets going, I'll get it loaded into Black Betty, and while it's heating up, I'm going to get my COVID booster and come back and put the meat on. See you in a bit. Welcome back. It's been about 4 hours since I put the ribs in. The only thing I've done just now was to add some more water and put in some Wagyu tallow to melt down. I'm going to check the internal temperature here. And we're getting to a good 169. When it reaches 190, I'm going to spray a little bit of 50/50 apple cider vinegar and apple mango juice, just to add a little bit more to the bark. When I reach 190 internal, I'm going to wrap the ribs in butcher's paper and with the tallow, and put it back in for another hour to finish the cook off, and we'll talk at you later when I do another update. So as you can see, we've reached the point of 190, a little over 190 internal. What we're going to do now is we are going to wrap the last few degrees. I'm going to pour a little bit this Wagyu beef tallow, much like I would with a brisket. Turn the ribs upside down. Makes for easier wrapping so that you end up with the meat side up. We tuck that in. And now we're going to go back into the smoker. So here you have the finished product. As you can see how the meat has receded from the bones on both sides. And there you can see the spices I use. Now if we take and we cut one, you can see how the moisture is juicy on the inside. So to recap, the total was 4.5 hours. Well, to recap even further, I seasoned and trimmed the ribs the night before and put them in the refrigerator. This morning I started the smoker and went 4.5 hours, where the cooking level of the ribs was around 225, and then I ramped it up to 235, excuse me, and 235 to 240 for about 2 hours, and then the last bit was about 250 to 260 as I was ramping it up before I wrapped them. And I wrapped them for about an hour, and then I let them sit for an hour. So anyway, all in all, we're going to take a little bite here. I know you can't see me eating it, but I would say that this is a success for the first time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good day.